Greetings, you loathsome sinners. I am Alastor the Radio Demon. You've caught me in the middle of quite the good book. After all, it is All Hallows, the time of the macabre and the terrifying, the spine-tingling and the soul-shattering. Why don't you join me for a spell? I'm sure we'll have quite the scary stories to tell. So boils and ghouls, sit right there. Ignore the flashing text if you please. This is going to be quite entertaining. Our first scary story to tell in the dark comes from the novel of the same name, collected and retold by Alvin Schwartz. This, my friends, is the story of the Wendigo. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly, and he agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted. They had nothing to show for it. The third night, a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling, and the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defago, it called. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in a corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. What is this all about? The hunter asked. It's nothing, Defago said. But the wind continued to call to him, and Defago became more tense and more restless. Defago, it called. Defago. Suddenly he jumped to his feet, and he began to run for the tent. But the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. You can't leave me out here, the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire!" And his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went through the woods, down toward the lake, and then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something quite strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, but there they disappeared. At first he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off of the ice and into the sky. But that made no sense. As he stood wondering what had happened, the wind picked up again. Soon it was howling as it had the night before. Then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from above, and again he heard Defago screaming, "My fiery feet, my burning feet!" But there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. Then he left some food for Defago, and he started out. Weeks later he reached civilization. The following year he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what happened to Defago that night, but they had not seen him since then. Maybe it was the Wendigo, one of them said, and he laughed. It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away, and more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky and drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and he asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help, but he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed, for there was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes. Wasn't that simply titillating? Now, my friends, this next one is a little bit of a rhyme, a limerick, if you will. And some say that this rhyme doesn't mean anything. Others are not as sure. There was a man who lived in Leeds. He filled his garden full of seeds. And when the seeds began to grow, it was like a garden filled with snow. But when the snow began to melt, it was like a ship without a belt. And when the ship began to sail, it was like a bird without a tail. And when the bird began to fly, it was like an eagle in the sky. And when the sky began to roar, it was like a lion at my door. And when the door began to crack, it was like a penknife in my back. And when my back began to bleed, I was dead. Dead, dead indeed. I hope you enjoyed that. There's yet another story to tell from the first installment of these books. This next one will be the last of the original Scary Stories book. And then we'll tell some more from the next installments. This one is called The Hook. It's a more abridged version. I'm sure you're all quite familiar. Why, this tale was almost as old as I. Let us begin. Donald and Sarah went to the movies. Then they went for a ride in Donald's car. They parked upon a hill at the edge of town. From there they could see all the lights up and down the valley. Donald turned on the radio and found some music. But an announcer broke in with a news bulletin. A murderer had escaped from the state prison. He was armed with a knife and was headed south on foot. His left hand was missing. In its place, he wore a hook. "Let's roll up the windows and lock the doors," said Sarah. "That's a good idea," replied Donald. "That prison isn't too far away," said Sarah. "Maybe we really should go home." "But it's only 10 o'clock, said Donald. "I don't care what time it is," she said. "I want to go home." "Look, Sarah," said Donald. "He's not going to climb all the way up here. Why would he do that? Even if he did, all the doors are locked. How could he get in?" "Donald, he could take that hook and break through a window and open the door," she said. "I'm scared and want to go home." Donald was annoyed. "Girls are always afraid of something," he said. As he started the car, Sarah thought she heard someone or something scratching at her door. "Did you hear that?" she asked as they roared away. "It sounded like somebody was trying to get in." "Oh, sure," said Donald. Soon they got to her house. "Would you like to come in and have some cocoa?" she asked. "No," he said. "I've got to go home." He went around to the other side of the car to let her out. And there, hanging on the door handle, was a hook. Why, wasn't that simply screeching Tootsie? Our next installment comes from the second novel, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Once again by Alvin Schwartz. All right, my sinful friends. Let's begin the next story, shall we? The title of this gory tale of gruesome gnarliness is Wonderful Sausage. One dark, rainy Saturday afternoon, a fat and jolly butcher named Samuel Blunt had an argument over money with his wife Eloise. Blunt lost his temper and killed Eloise. Then he ground her up into sausage meat and buried her bones under a big flat rock in the backyard. To keep the murder a secret, he told everyone that she had moved away. Blunt mixed his new sausage meat with pork, then seasoned it with salt and pepper, added some sage and thyme, and a bit of garlic. To give it a special flavor, he smoked it in his smokehouse for a while. He called it Blunt's Special Sausage. There was such a demand for this new sausage that Blunt bought the best hogs he could find and started raising his own pork. He also kept a sharp lookout for humans who might make a tasty sausage meat. One day, a nice, plump schoolteacher came into his shop. Blunt grabbed her and ground her up. Another time, Blunt's dentist came by. He was a little round man, and into the grinder he went. Then one by one, the children of the neighborhood began to disappear. and so did their kittens and puppies, but no one ever dreamed that Blunt the butcher had anything to do with it. Things went on that way for years, and one day Blunt made a big mistake. A fat boy came into the butcher shop. Blunt grabbed him and started to drag him off to the sausage grinder, but the boy broke loose and ran out of the shop, and Blunt chased after him waving a big butcher knife. When people saw this, they realized at once what had become of all the missing children and grown-ups, kittens and puppies. An angry crowd gathered at the butcher shop. No one knows for sure just what happened to Blunt that day. Some say he was fed to his hogs. Others say he was fed to his sausage grinder. But he was never seen again. And neither was his wonderful sausage meat. Our next gruesome tale of gore is known simply as cemetery soup. On her way home from the market, a woman took a shortcut through the cemetery. There, sticking up out of the ground, she saw a big bone. She picked it up and looked it over carefully. "This will make a very good soup bone," she said. "I think I'll take it home. It's perfect weather for hot soup." When she got home, the first thing she did was start the soup. Into the big soup pot went water, carrots, green beans, corn, barley, onions, potatoes, a snitch of beef, some salt and pepper, and the bone. She brought it all to a boil and brought it down to a simmer. "Yum," she said, sniffing it and tasting it. "I can hardly wait till supper." Suddenly she heard a small voice. "Please give me back my bone." The woman paid no attention. Soon she heard the voice again. "May I have my bone back, please?" The woman was reading the newspaper, and again she didn't take any notice. In a little while the voice spoke up once more. It was beginning to sound angry. "Give me back my bone." The woman kept on reading the paper. "Some people are too impatient," she muttered. Once more the voice spoke. Now it sounded very angry, and it was so loud that the whole house shook. "I want my bone back." The woman reached into the pot, grabbed the bone, and threw it out the window. In a voice just as loud, she shouted, "Take it!" There was an eerie silence. Then the woman heard footsteps scurrying away from the house down the road toward the cemetery. And she got up and served herself some soup. Why, that was quite the tasty tale. It has me hankering for some of my mother's jambalaya. Why, she once showed me a wonderful recipe for jambalaya. In fact, it nearly killed her. You could say the cook was straight out of hell. Oh, I'm on a roll. But my friends, there's still yet one more little bit from the second book before we move on to the third and final installment. This one is quite simple. Something of a song or a limerick. O'Leary is dead, and O'Reilly didn't know it. O'Reilly is dead, and O'Leary don't know it. They both are dead in the very same bed, and neither one knows that the other one's dead. Ba-room, ba-room. Well, my friends, we've come to the third installment. There are a number of things that we're going to take from in this one. As with the other two, 3 little tidbits will be read. And when we're done, I'll send you off to bed, and hopefully nightmares won't fill up your heads. Our first tale from the third installment, Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones by Alvin Schwartz, is known quite simply as The Appointment. A 16-year-old boy worked on his grandfather's horse farm. One morning, he drove a pickup truck into town on an errand. While he was walking along the main street, he saw death. Death beckoned to him. The boy drove back to the farm as fast as he could and told his grandfather what had happened. "Give me the truck," he begged. "I'll go to the city. You'll never find me there." His grandfather gave him the truck, and the boy sped away. After he left, his grandfather went into town looking for Death. When he found him, he asked, "Why did you frighten my grandson that way? He is only 16. He is too young to die." "I'm sorry about that," said Death. "I did not mean to beckon to him. I was surprised to see him here, you see. I have an appointment with him this afternoon in the city." Why isn't that just deadly delightful? Our second installment for this terrifying tale is just delicious. And I'll have you know that is the name of the story, not merely my morbid sense of humor. George Flint loved to eat. Each day at noon, he closed his camera shop for 2 hours and went home for a big lunch. His wife, Mina, cooked for him. George was a bully, and Mina was a timid woman who did everything he asked because she was afraid of him. On his way home for lunch one day, George stopped at a butcher shop and bought a pound of liver. He loved liver. He would have Mina cook it for dinner that night. Despite all his complaints about her, she was a very good cook. While George ate his lunch, Mina told him that a rich old woman in town had died. Her body was in the church next door. It was in an open coffin. Anyone who wanted to see her could. As usual, George was not interested in what Mina had to say. "I've got to go back to work," he told her. After he left, Mina began to cook the liver. She added vegetables and spices and simmered it all afternoon, just the way George liked it. When she thought it was done, she cut off a small piece and tasted it. It was delicious, the best she had ever made. She ate a second piece, then a third. It was so good she couldn't stop eating it. It was only when the liver was all gone that she thought of George. He would be coming home soon. What would he do when he found that she had eaten all the liver? Some men would laugh, but not George. He would be angry and mean, and she did not want to face that again. But where could she get another piece of liver that late in the day? Then she remembered the old woman lying in the church next door, waiting to be buried. George said he had never had a better dinner. "Have some liver, Mina," he said. "It's just delicious." "I'm not hungry," she said. "You finish it." That night, after George had fallen asleep, Mina sat in bed trying to read. But all she could think about was what she had done. Then she thought she heard a woman's voice. Who has my liver? It asked. Who has it? Was it her imagination? Was she dreaming? And the voice was closer. Who has my liver? It asked. Who has it? Mina wanted to run. No, no, she whispered. I don't have it. I don't have your liver. Now the voice was right next to her. Who has my liver? It asked. Who has it? Mina froze with terror. She pointed to George. He does, she said. He has it. Suddenly the light went out, and George screamed and screamed and screamed until the screaming ended. Nevermore would he have anything that delicious again. Why, what a marvelous tale of terror. Bon appetit, George. Bon appetit. My friends, my loathsome sinners, we've come to the end of our tales of macabre. But we'll end things on a jaunty note. This little number is known as You May Be the Next. Did you ever think as a hearse goes by that you may be the next to die? They wrap you up in a big white sheet from your head down to your feet. And the worms crawl in and the worms crawl out, in your stomach and out your snout. And your eyes fall out and your teeth decay. And that's the end of a perfect day. I hope you enjoyed this little story time of ours. Happy Halloween to all of you loathsome sinners. A joyous All Hallows, a solemn Samhain, and a festive Le Dia de los Muertos. Oh, and to the bronies out there who tuned in, why, thank you for joining us. I hope you all have quite a nightmarish nightmare night. If you enjoyed these terrifying tales, these bone-chilling installments, I would like very much for you to hit that like button down below. And if you didn't like it, well, feel welcome to hit that dislike button if you wish. Let us know in the comments down below what you thought. And I insist that you leave any of your constructive criteria for us to read. And, of course, inform us of what else you would like to see on this channel. If you liked what you saw and want to see more, tap that subscriber button. And if you're not familiar with the content here on the channel, either by myself or the other menagerie of characters, hit the name above the video description below. That's all the time we have for today, you loathsome sinners. As the host of this channel loves to say, have yourself a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and a great weekend ahead, depending on when you get around to seeing today's video. And as always, remember, don't go changing for anyone but yourselves. We'll see you right back here, same Moonshadow time, same Mystery Channel. I trust we have a deal then. See you all soon. Hmm, 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 hmm.